Hi, this is Sharon Grace and welcome to my channel. Today, I will share with you another lesson in the subject 21st Century Literature from the Philippines and the World. The first module of Quarter 2 in the subject 21st Century Literature from the Philippines and the World is Module 6, which is about writing a close analysis and critical interpretation of literary texts, applying a reading approach. The What I Need to Know section has this message to the learner or the user of the module. So this module was designed and written with you in mind. It is here to help you understand 21st century literature from the Philippines and the world. The scope of this module permits it to be used in many different learning situations. The language used recognizes the diverse vocabulary level of students. The lessons are arranged to follow the standard sequence of the course. After going through your module, you are expected to A. Write a close analysis and critical interpretation of literary texts using a reading approach and identify representative texts from Africa and Asia. B. Create or produce a creative representation of a literary text by applying multimedia skills. And C, show appreciation of the different representative literary texts. The What I Know section allows you to answer a 15-item test. So please take your time. If you are done answering the 15-item test, please check it by referring to the answer key at the end of the module. The What's in part gives you 3 questions to answer. 1. What are ICT skills? 2. What are the essential elements of the literary piece, footnote to youth? 3. What is the use of multimedia to relatively interpret a literary text? Under What's New, you're going to answer a 5-item test where you guess the hidden words associated with reading through configuration. Reading approach. Teachers use reading approach as one of the methods in teaching English. This approach is one way of solving students' reading problems. Students are demanded to read more to improve their knowledge and get new ideas. Inferencing, guessing, and predicting are important skills developed in reading. By reading, students will know about the different cultures by reading across cultural understanding, plus they will learn how to pronounce the words correctly. In reading approach, students are expected to improve their English skills. Skimming. In skimming, the main idea of a text is quickly identified. The goal is to read shorter texts to extract accurate, detailed information. Skimming is done at speed 3 to 4 times faster than regular reading. People often skim when they have lots of material to read in a limited amount of time. Some students will read the first and last paragraphs using headings, summaries, and other organizers as they move down the page or screen. Some might also read the title, subtitles, subheadings, and illustrations. Other people consider reading the first sentence of each paragraph. Skimming works well to find dates, names, and places. It might be used to review graphs, tables, and charts. This technique is useful when you are seeking specific information rather than reading for comprehension. Scanning. Scanning is quickly reading a text to get the summary of it. It is a technique wherein students search for keywords or ideas. Scanning involves moving the eyes quickly down the page, seeking specific words and phrases. Scanning is also used for the reader to find answers to questions. Once a student scanned the document, they will go back and skim it. Extensive reading is an approach to language learning, including foreign language learning, by means of a large amount of reading. The reader's view and review of unfamiliar words in a specific context will allow the reader to infer the word's meaning, to learn unknown words. Extensive reading is the free reading of books and other written material that is not too difficult for the readers. Extensive reading is sometimes called free voluntary reading. Under What's More, you're going to read the selection CHECHNYA by Anthony Mara and answer the questions that follow. After her sister Natasha died, Sonia began sleeping in the hospital. She returned home to wash her clothes a few days a month, but those days became fewer and fewer. No reason to return, no need to wash her clothes. She only wears hospital scrubs anyway. She wakes on a cot in the trauma unit. She sleeps there intentionally, in anticipation of the next critical patient. Some days, roused by the shuffle of footsteps, the cries of family members, she stands and a body takes her place on the cot. And she works on resuscitation, knowing she is awake because she could dream nothing like this. A man is waiting here to see you, a nurse says. Sonia, still on the cot, rubs the weariness from her eyes. About what? The nurse hesitates. He's right out here. A minute later, in the hallway, the man introduces himself. My name is Ahmed. He speaks Russian without an accent. But by now, Sonia feels more comfortable conversing in Chechen. A short beard descends from Ahmed's face. And for a moment, she thinks he is a religious man, then remembers that most men have grown their beards out. Few have shaving cream, fewer have mirrors. The war has made the country's cheeks and chins devout. He gestures to a small girl, no older than 8, standing beside him. My wife and I cannot care for her, Ahmed says. You must take her. This isn't an orphanage. There are no orphanages. The request is not uncommon. The hospital receives humanitarian aid, has food and clean water. And most important, it tends to the injured, regardless of ethnicity or military affiliation, making the hospital one of the few larger buildings left untargeted by either side in the war. Newly injured arrive each day, too many to care for. Sonia shakes her head. Too many dying. She cannot be expected to care for the living as well. Her father was taken by the rebels on Saturday. On Sunday, the army came and took her mother. Sonia looks at the wall calendar as if a date could make sense of the times. Today is Monday, she says. I was a medical student before the war, Ahmed says, switching to Chechen. In my final year, I will work here until a home is found for the girl. Ahmed glowers. Sonia often sees defiance from rebels and occasionally from soldiers, but rarely from civilians. I can't, she says, but her voice falters, her justification failing. Sonia surveys the corridor, a handful of patients, no doctors. Those with money, with advanced degrees and the foresight to flee the country have done so. Parents decide which of their children they can afford to feed on which days. No one will take this girl, Sonia says. Then I will keep working. Does she speak? Sonia looks to the girl. What's your name? Haba. Ahmed answers. 6 months earlier, Sonia's sister Natasha was repatriated from Italy. When Sonia heard the knock and opened the door, she couldn't believe how healthy her sister looked. She hugged her sister, joked about the padding on her hips. Whatever horrors Natasha had experienced in the West, she'd put fat around her waist. "I am home," Natasha said, holding the hug longer than Sonia thought necessary. They ate dinner before the sun went down, potatoes boiled over the furnace. The army had cut the electric lines 4 years earlier. They had never been repaired. Sonia showed her sister to the spare room by candlelight, gestured to the bed. "This is the place you sleep, Natasha." They spent the week in a state of heightened civility, no prying questions. All talk was small. What Sonia noticed, she did not comment on. A bottle of ribavirin antiviral pills on the bathroom sink, cigarette burns on Natasha's shoulders. Sonia worked on surgeries, and Natasha worked on sleeping. Sonia brought food home from the hospital, and Natasha ate it. Sonia started the fire in the morning. Natasha slept. There were mornings and there were nights. This is life, Sonia thought. Ahmed is true to his word. 5 minutes after Sonia accepts the girl, he is washed and suited in scrubs. Sonia takes him on a tour of the hospital. All but 2 wings are closed for lack of staff. She shows him the cardiology, internal medicine, and endocrinology wards. A layer of dust covers the floors, their footprints, leaving a trail. Sonia thinks of the moon landing, how she saw the footage for the first time when she arrived in London. "Where is everything?" Ahmed asks. "Beds, sheets, hypodermics, disposable gowns, surgical tape, film dressing, thermometers, IV bags, forceps. Any item of practical medical use is gone. Empty cabinets, open drawers, locked rooms, closed blinds, taped over window panes. The stale air remain. The trauma and maternity wards, and we're struggling to keep them both open." Ahmed runs his fingers through his beard. "Trauma. That's obvious. You have to keep trauma open. But maternity?" Sonia's laugh rings down the empty hall. "I know. It's funny, isn't it? Everyone is either giving birth or dying." "No," Ahmed shakes his head, and Sonia wonders if he's offended by her. "They're coming into the world, and they're leaving the world, and it's happening here." Sonia nods, wonders if Ahmed is religious after all. After reading the selection, complete the table below. Under literary element, you have setting and character. Under question column, you have question number 1. Where and when did the story happen? 2. Who are the characters in the story? Use skimming as a reading technique. Assessment 1 checks your comprehension level in relation to the selection Chechnya. Here are the 5 questions you will answer. 1. What descriptions were given about the setting of the story? 2. What seems to be the conflict surrounding the story? 3. What was the deal made by Sonia and Ahmed? 4. What change in attitude was evident in the main character of the story at the beginning and at the end? 5. Why was it important for the writer to narrate the events that happened during the wars to reveal traditions in Chechnya? For Activity 2, you will read another story in your module, then answer the questions that follow. Here's the story. I'm going to read it for you. Adaptation from The Journey to the River Sea by Eva Ibbotson. Maya is an orphan. Her only guardian is a lawyer named Mr. Murray. whose only responsibility is to help her with a small amount of money her parents have left her when they died. Then Maya learned that her relatives, the Carters, would be willing to take care of her. When a note written by the Carter twins, Gwendolyn and Beatrice, arrives, Maya makes up her mind to go live with the Carters in their house on the Amazon. She travels there with Miss Minton, her new tutor. On the boat from England, she meets Clovis King, a struggling child actor. The two quickly became friends. Maya is very excited to live with the Carters. She imagines that she and the twins will become the best of friends and they will have a wonderful time together. However, the only reason the Carters took Maya in was her money. In reality, Gwendolyn and Beatrice are selfish. They hate Maya before they even know her. Maya feels like being with the Carters is like being in prison. Soon, however, she meets Finn, who is running away from private detectives known as the Crows. They are trying to force Finn to return to England and claim his inheritance. When Clovis committed a mistake in a play where he belongs, he goes to Maya for help because his acting company fires him. She and Finn hide him in the hidden lagoon where Finn lives and devise a plan to get Clovis back to England. Finn, Maya, and Clovis plan to make the Crows believe that Clovis is Finn, so Clovis pretended to be Finn. Meanwhile, in England, Clovis confesses that he is not the real Finn and wishes to go home, which causes Sir Aubrey, Finn's father, to have a heart attack. The real Finn goes to his father's home to help Clovis reveal the truth. In the end, Mrs. Carter, Beatrice, and Gwendolyn return to England to become servants of their wealthy relative. However, Maya, Miss Minton, and Clovis all return to Brazil. Finn inherits all his family's money. How did you find the story? I hope you found it interesting. For this activity, you will fill out the table with point of view, conflict, and theme. You will use scanning as a reading technique. This table has 3 columns. The first column has 3 literary elements. These are point of view, conflict, and theme. And for each element, there is a corresponding question, which is written under column 2, or the second column. For point of view, the question is, who is narrating in the story? You will give your answer in the third column. Question number 2, in relation to conflict, what is the struggle of the main character? Third question, under theme, we have, what is the idea the story is focusing? Okay, so it wouldn't be hard if you understand the story pretty well. We will now proceed to the next activity, which is comprehension check. There are 3 questions that you will answer. The first one is, what problems did Maya experience during her travel to Brazil? 2. What are the characteristics of Gwendolyn and Beatrice? And 3. What life lessons did she learn from her friends Finn and Clovis? There is another assessment activity. This is called critical reading check. I'm going to read for you, or read to you, this selection by Naoku Kumagai. The title is Shimi Nawa. This is a story I was told. It was August 1973. My brother Jiro was 4, sitting at dinner. Itadakimasu, my uncle said. Jiro picked up onigiri, a rice ball, with his hands and mashed it into his mouth. Fish and rice on his plate, untouched. He stuffed another onigiri on his mouth. bits of rice falling. Jiro-chan, a warning from my mother. Jiro opened his mouth wide, splayed his tongue covered in tiny white beads of rice. Kazuya stood up and roughly pulled Jiro out of his chair. "What are you doing?" my mother asked, getting up. Kazuya went out the back door, carrying Jiro firmly under his arm. With the other hand, he picked up a circle of rope hanging on the fence by the shed. In the yard was a large oak tree with heavy, twisted branches. He wrapped the rope around my brother once, then pushed him to the trunk of the oak, winding the rope around and around. He must eat his dinner properly. My uncle tied a thick knot at the end. He needs to learn to be a man. My mother was shouting at my uncle. Jiro was screaming, the sound flooding the sky. Kazuya went back into the house, relaxed and entitled as if he had just finished a long day's work. No one remembers the rest. My mother never forgave my uncle. My father wasn't there, and Jiro can't recall any of it. He jokes that the incident is possibly the reason he always intuitively eats everything on his plate. Isn't it an interesting story? It's something that we can relate to, right? So for those with uncles and aunts, you try to recall how you were treated when you were a child or during your childhood days. Okay, so that's how Jiro was treated by his strict uncle. So the activity that follows the selection is something wherein you are to complete the third statement. There are two sentences given or provided, so you will be the one to complete or the third statement that is introduced. For example, Shiminawa is rice, straw, or hemp. It is festooned in some sacred landmark. The short story is entitled that way because Activity 3 is called Newly Learned. You are going to fill out another table with words you don't know the meaning of from the two selections, Chechnya by Anthony Mara and Adaptation from The Journey to the River Sea by Eva Ibatsan. It should not be difficult. You will just identify the words you're not familiar with and look up their meaning in your dictionary or Google them. Or through context clues. Activity 4 is about critical analysis of the poem. You will read the poem or you will listen to me read the poem to you, and then afterwards you are to write a critical essay about it by completing the guide in the grid. So in your module it can be found below the poem. Here is the poem. Equality by Maya Angelou. You declare you see me dimly, through a glass which will not shine. Though I stand before you boldly, trim in rank and marking time. You do own to hear me faintly, as a whisper out of range, while my drums beat out the message, and the rhythms never change. Equality, and I will be free. Equality, and I will be free. You announce my ways are wanton, that I fly from man to man. But if I'm just a shadow to you, could you ever understand? We have lived a painful history. We know the shameful past, but I keep on marching forward, and you keep on coming last. Equality, and I will be free. Equality, and I will be free. Take the blinders from your vision. Take the padding from your ears, and confess you've heard me crying, and admit you've seen my tears. Hear the tempo so compelling. Hear the blood throb in my veins. Yes, my drums are beating nightly, and the rhythms never change. Equality, and I will be free. Equality, and I will be free. This is your guide for the critical essay. Roman numeral 1, background information. Capital letter A, information about the work. 1, title. 2, author. 3, purpose of the poem, provide evidence, extract lines from the poem, theme of the poem, then Roman numeral number 2, summary. Write the issues being raised in the poem. Roman numeral 3, interpretation and evaluation. You will discuss the style of the author in presenting the issues. B, discuss if the author was successful in persuading the audience regarding the issues. And finally, Roman numeral 4, reflection, how the issues presented affect you. In the next part of your module, under what I have learned, you have there a list or summary of the concepts that you have learned. For what I can do, here is the activity. You're going to complete the following sentences. There are 3 statements to be completed. 1, in this lesson, I learned that skimming is, okay, you provide the answer. 2, I learned that scanning is. And 3, I learned that extensive reading is. Another activity is to analyze the verse and explore the content, theme, setting, and message of the poem below by creating a visual poem. Include a short background of the author and then search for images that support the required elements of the poem. You may select any multimedia tools that suit your skills and availability of a gadget. So here's the poem, In Another World by Razak Malik. In another world, I want to be a father without passing through the eternal insanity of mourning my children, without experiencing the ritual of watching my children return home as bodies folded like a prayer mat, without spending my nights telling them the stories of a hometown where natives become aliens searching for a shelter. I want to watch my children grow to recite the name of their homeland like Lord's Prayer, to frolic in the streets without being hunted like animals in the bush, without being mobbed to death. In another world, I want my children to tame grasshoppers in the field, to play with their dolls in the living room, to inhale the fragrance of flowers waving as wind blows, to see the